fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. We've got Joe Goldberg in the room. So
I'm in the house. I'm packing, getting ready for BoucherCon.
Oh,
I think our guest is going to be at BoucherCon. Maybe we can cross paths and he can buy me a drink or something. You know, notice how I did that. He can buy me a drink.
yeah, he's buying you a drink. Well, you can buy more than one. He knows you.
Then I'm having Diet Cokes. You know, if he's buying, then I'm having, you know, the foo-foo drink with the umbrella. But if I'm buying, then it's, hey, have an olive.
Yeah.
It all depends on how this interview goes.
yeah. I've already followed you on Instagram and other stuff, so it's too late now.
Dangerous.
You're in the book.
Yeah, you're in the book. Well, we've certainly got another one today. We've quite the week here. We're working hard this week. So what can I say? We've got a guest with us. He's done a lot of things, but his newest book is called Enimies, Domestic. Now, it's a Lark Chadwick Mystery, and it's book 6. John DeDakis, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Al. It's good to be here. And Joe, it's nice to meet you, and we'll see what happens in Nashville.
Great, thank you.
So what's going on? So now you, with all of your history, you know, with CNN is your biggest, and working with Wolf Blitzer and stuff, you'd think you'd have enough of this. And so you're writing mysteries, and you're getting into all these sort of, you know, where you're involved with White House press secretary and all this, like you've got all this stuff going on, this stuff. So you really like what you did.
I did, but I mean, you write what you know, so that makes it easier. I don't have to, I get to make up the news now.
Oh, well, there you go. Fake news.
You mean it's not made up? Yeah. There's an assumption there, John.
Depends on where you get your news.
Exactly.
That's crazy. How does this make you feel, the way that the news business and the presidency and all this stuff that's happened, and the way people have kind of gone against media in the last, let's say, 8-10 years or so, and the negativity toward it? How does that make it? Are you surprised?
Oh, no, because they've actually been going against the news media since Nixon was president, and Spiro Agnew was running around the country calling reporters nattering nabobs of negativism and an effete corps of impudent snobs. That's just a more elegant way of saying fake news. And so right from the very beginning of my journalism career, I was having arguments with my parents about the news media. You know, they thought that the news media ran Nixon out of the White House. And, of course, he ran himself out of the White House by doing things that were obstruction of justice that was caught on tape. And Woodward and Bernstein just happened to be, dogged reporters who uncovered the truth. So there's always been friction, and it's always been an adversarial relationship. But things have changed a lot, I think, with the advent of social media. Because now everyone who has a cell phone, every time you push the button that says share, there's no editor on your shoulder going, where'd you get that? How do you know that's true? And so we are deluged with false information now. And at least back in the day, there were editors, challenging reporters to be clear about the quality of the information they were getting. Those news organizations still exist, but Trump has done a tremendous job of undermining faith in journalism.
Well, I get so many questions. I teach social media at a local college, and I use citizen journalism. If you have a phone, you can be a journalist. Doesn't make you a journalist because of the things you talk about, the gatekeepers of the editors. So do you, given the fact that you take your stories from the current events, especially this current book, and we'll get to that, do you see social media as a impetus to change in the way information is going to, obviously, to the end user, but in the world of books, that social media has become sort of a critical element of book writing in many ways?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, social media is sort of a blessing and a curse. It's in its existence is morally neutral. It's basically, what people do with it. And it's essential for being a writer and an author. Back when I first started out, when you'd pitch an agent, you'd send them a self-addressed stamped envelope. Remember envelopes? Remember
Yes.
snail
I
mail?
did that back in the day. That wasn't that long ago.
And now it's all online. You need to have a website. You have to be, you have to have a social media platform because that's where people meet in cyberspace. And, that's fine. And I think that has the advent of social media has revolutionized, communication and book selling and all that.
What do you feel about using current events for your books? Like, if you want to talk about your current book, the next book, it's ripped from the headlines, right?
It really is. This is the sixth novel I wrote. This fifth one, Fake, my protagonist, Lark Chadwick, is a White House she's a White House correspondent, and she's the victim of fake news. And I started writing that book when Trump was elected president because I was troubled by his comments that journalists are the enemies of the American people. It's just not true. They hold people accountable, politicians accountable, but that only makes them an enemy if you've got something to cover up. So I wrote it to give people an understanding of what goes on behind the scenes, especially when my protagonist is a victim of falsehoods. So fast forward to Enemies Domestic, I was going to go in an entirely different direction, and then the Alito abortion decision leaked. Lark, at the end of Fake, is pregnant, and so Enemies Domestic picks up just a few months after Fake ends, and I wanted to put her in a post-Roe era, and yet she's ambivalent about becoming a single mom. The dad's dead, and she becomes White House press secretary, and on her first day on the job, the first question that she's asked comes from a reporter with an agenda who asks, are you or are you not planning to abort your unborn child? And so that launches, that question propels the book forward. And as we go forward, we have a president who becomes a dictator, and it really is ripped from reality. In fact, there's a line in there that Trump stated, when he declared his presidency, his candidacy, where America, I am your retribution and your vengeance. That's in the book, and it's from Donald Trump, although I don't name him as the source.
Don't you feel a little bit? Well, I guess that's not even the way to say it, but when you're touching off such controversial situations, and so close to real, what kind of feedback do you get? Do you get any sort of negativity toward that?
Haven't yet. I won't be surprised if it happens. It's abortion is certainly a nuanced and emotional issue. So is dictatorship. This election is really an election between totalitarianism and democracy, quite frankly, in my opinion. So blowback is certainly a possibility. I've tried to present the abortion issue, though, in a way so that no matter where you come down on the issue, I hope you'll see that your position is fairly represented, because it is nuanced, and it's not a black and white slam dunk easy decision when a person is in the middle of it. And that's the freedom you have as a writer by creating characters who are wrestling with real issues. So far, the feedback has been great. A lot of 5-star reviews on Amazon. But I don't know, maybe we can get the book banned, and that'll help sales as well.
Yeah, we're gonna work on that. We'll get you some feedback here. Boy.
Okay.
We'll get them going. What is your relationship like when you were talking about your main character Lark and some of the others? What's your relationship with her? Like, how do you see that? How would you describe it? It's like family, daughter, friend. Where do you put that?
Oh man, I would say Lark is my alter ego. She's very much me. It's just she's got a skirt on. I don't wear skirts. She doesn't like them either.
Well, I've got pictures.
Yeah. You can have mine.
That's true. The CIA knows everything.
Yeah. That's the FBI, man. FBI.
But no, Lark is very much based on me, and I'm able to write a female character primarily because I think emotions are not gender specific. We all have the same emotions. It's just that, in my experience, it's the women in my life who are more articulate about their emotions and they're more willing to share them. And, I've had plenty of beta readers who are women who give me the feedback I need to make Lark more authentic.
Well, that was actually sort of my question about writing the female character, because I'm doing that myself. In fact, I'm writing a female journalist. Yeah, and I have journalist friends, I've talked to them, but what are the characteristics when you put a female journalist and journalists together? What is the key core characteristics of them? What drives them?
Ooh, that's an excellent question. I think based on my experience and the women I know in journalism, a lot of it is you're fighting sexism. And so, a lot of it is you're on the defensive. I mean, women, I think, in general are on the defensive, and guys don't quite understand that. And I think with women, it's in journalism, it's even more so. You really have to prove yourself. You've got to be careful that you're not, being backed into a corner where, you have to give out sexual favors in order for advancement. And so that means you have to work extra hard to be, as good as the guys. I don't know if that's I think the essence of it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Right. See there, Joe, you don't have to put out anymore.
Well, I started writing that, but those are, and this is maybe a question too, is some of them are hit in the face, abortion, dictator issues. We know those. But how do you write those subtext issues, the sexism, maybe the racism, maybe the isms that probably help fuel your story underneath?
I think a lot of it just has to do with the relationships I've got, the conversations that I have with people, just being aware of, what it's like to be a woman in America. And so, and then I think a lot of the subplots that I use in my novels are usually things that I'm wrestling with at the time as well. My fourth novel, Bullet in the Chamber, my son died of a heroin overdose in 2011. And so the subplot deals with the collateral damage around, when a loved one goes missing and then is found dead. So it was a catharsis, it was therapeutic, and I think it also deepened Lark's character at the same time.
Are you thinking about your subtext then? Is this something that you have in your mind as you put together the book, or is it something that comes more, let's say, more organically?
Both. I think that often, like, for instance, Fast Track, my first novel deals with suicide, and it was written, 10 or 15 years after my sister killed herself in 1980. And so I knew that was an issue I wanted to explore, but I also discover that as I'm writing, I'm much more sensitive to the things that are going on around me, and it's not a stretch for something that I saw in the news that day, to show up, in a piece of dialogue or something like that. It's both. But
when you're living it, it's a very important subject because it's part of your life, and so you do know a lot of it, and you can express feelings. But when you put that on paper for the world to see, and you release it in a book, does it make you feel a little bit vulnerable? Make you feel a little bit uneasy?
No, not really, because it's not really you. It's the characters. I'm working on a memoir now, and that's a little dicier because it is me. And there are some things that I'm not particularly proud of about myself that I'll be revealing. Whereas in fiction, you can camouflage a lot of the capital T truth details, and you can, make up small t truth mosaic tiles. And so it's not necessarily as vulnerable.
Right. Plus, you can also decide an outcome. You can also make sure there is some sense of justice in your mind of when you're writing a story that's like this, rather than what happens in real life doesn't always go the way it should, right? So
Exactly. Yeah, the life is not necessarily as neat and tidy as we can make it in fiction.
yeah, but you shouldn't be worried about them seeing you in a skirt. That's
Yeah.
just saying. Just saying. Yeah.
Yes. So John, if I understand, your books are standalones?
It's a series, but
Yeah.
they're written so that you don't have to read them in order.
So you said that Lark was pregnant in the last book, and that's a factor in this book, but it doesn't make a difference because that's just the way the character is in this next book, right? Just has to be pregnant. And the backstory is the backstory.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I didn't, it was, that was the way Fake ended, and it just fit nicely with where I was going to go next.
Did you have this planned out, the series?
No, I just wanted to get published. That was hard enough. And it was then, as I was writing, that I began to get ideas for subsequent books.
Did you know how Lark was going to develop as a character at all?
Nope, had no clue.
So it was just you have a name, you build a character, you sat down, and you started hounding on Lark.
There you go. And the characters need to change, and supposedly as human beings, we should change and grow as well. And so that was, I guess, my first novel was published 20 years ago, so arguably I'm a different person than I was, and maybe even a better person than I was. And Lark is also struggling. She struggles with anger issues, impulsiveness. It definitely gets her in trouble. That was, probably one of my shortcomings as a young man, and so I can bake some of that stuff authentically into Lark. As she goes forward, she does make progress, but in Enemies Domestic, I wrote that. I was pissed off the whole time I wrote it. Consequently, so was Lark.
Is she where you thought she would be after 6 books, and are you happy with where she's at now?
Yeah, I am happy with it. I mean, I like Lark. I mean, she's, I think, a relatable character. People have told me that, after the books end, they wonder how she's doing, so she sticks with them. They care about her. She makes, stupid decisions sometimes, and for which there are consequences. But she struggles and has some successes as well in becoming a better person too. So it's, it's definitely a dynamic.
You're writing it from her point of view then?
Yes, it's first person.
Right. With that in mind, how do you approach dialogue, or how do you get the dialogue so that you're happy with it?
That's a good question, and that's one of the ways that I'm able to move the story along. Even though I often have an idea of what the plot is going to be, in Enemies Domestic, that wasn't the case. It was basically, the process was despair, as you look at a blank page. If I can get the characters talking to each other, then that moves things along. It's like I have little flashlights on my knuckles that throw, just enough light down the trail. So I can write a chapter. Then I'd take it up to my wife, and she'd read it and give me great feedback, and then it's back to despair again. But the dialogue, which is the heart of your question, is you get the characters talking. And part of that is and this is sort of the spooky power of the subconscious. When you're asking questions, you're stirring things up, and there are voices in your head, there are experiences that are lodged in your subconscious that burble to the surface as you write. It's just, it's a writing technique I teach in some of my classes to get people to interview their characters and to get to know them better. And so that's what happens when I write, is the dialogue. Dialogue is essential. Some of the first drafts are almost exclusively dialogue.
Really? That's interesting. Because all writers think, dialogue, I hate dialogue, or something. I love dialogue. But is the fact that you've pretty much been asking questions for your entire career assist with you making those stories and that dialogue?
You're right. I mean, I think that at essence, a good journalist is a curious person. And I think that's the same for being a writer. You need to be curious about your characters. You need to be curious about, everything that's going on in the novel. And that's one of the things I think that fuels my creativity is the conversations that I have with people I meet in everyday life. I'm voraciously curious, and you really have to, I'm out of my comfort zone talking about myself. I would much rather be talking to you guys and asking you guys questions. In fact, Joe, you and I you let me ask you some questions before we rolled tape, because that's my comfort zone, is asking the questions.
Well, when I teach my social media class, I've been using this phrase for as long as I can remember, is that if you want to succeed, especially as in writing, social, anything, you need to be insatiably curious. You need to feel that something comes, you don't know the answer, you can't move forward until you've answered that question or know something, because you're just insatiably curious to survive in this information world.
That's what I tell my students, if you're listening, you're learning.
Okay, so now violence and action. Are you conscious of how you write the violence in the scene and where you place it?
Well, I guess I am, because if you write it, you need to be conscious about it. So, yeah, I am. Well,
in actuality, when you're putting it together, you might be thinking of a scene in a certain way, or a certain act of violence has to happen, but are you putting it all out there, or do you kind of, I don't know, maybe tone it down some or change it as you reread it?
Definitely that. You need, in the revision, you can tweak it. The great thing about writing is that time, it becomes elastic. And, you can take 1,000 pages to describe 1 minute, or you can take, one page and describe 1,000 years. And it's the same with violence. You can slow it down, and so that you can take it apart in a much more mindful way, so that you can, an actual violent event is over in an instant. But I think what makes it come alive for the reader is when you slow it down and take them through it step by step.
And with the negative person, or the bad people, as they want to call it, how do you get into that mindset? What is it you do to bring out that character?
I think I probably fudge that a little bit, because I write first person. Your point of view is limited to the first person. And so Lark's knowledge of the bad guy is based only on how much of the bad guy is presented. And often bad guys present themselves with their best foot forward. So it's, for the longest time, you're fooled. And Lark is fooled by whoever the antagonist is. And it isn't often until the very end where we get a sense of, what the motive was. So I think that if I wrote third person, and if I wrote in multiple points of view, I'd probably have a better handle on my antagonists. Often I do interview them just so that I get a better understanding of them. But a lot of that doesn't necessarily come out on the page, because Lark isn't privy to that as the story unspools.
Well, I'm fighting that battle right now. I have a first person, but I've decided to stick in third person chapters. But I don't want my first person to know more than sort of the reader does, and that's just sort of, it's a wall, and I can't help it. If I have those third persons ones, I am their perspective, and we're seeing stuff she's not seeing.
And make sure that those different chapters are signposted so that we're clear as the reader as to whose head we're in.
Right. When you teach writing, what do you think of that? I mean, you're a writer workshop guy. Tell me what you think about multiple POVs.
Oh, I think it's excellent, because we get to be in other people's heads, and we get to see a lot more. And sometimes, we can see what the protagonist doesn't see. And so there's that element of suspense. And so I'm fine with that. In fact, my second novel, I started to do that, and my agent says, no, you didn't do that in the first book, so you need to write the second one and the subsequent ones sticking primarily just with first-person point of view. And so I painted myself into a corner and had to do a major rewrite in order to, get everything so that it was just what Lark saw. But yeah, I'm fine with multiple points of view as long as it's clear whose head you're in.
I think that creates the best in suspense, but it really does. So when you're interviewing your characters and stuff like that, and you hear their voices and that, do they start taking over the story and take it places that you don't expect?
Yeah, they do. I can't remember that if a character has actually hijacked the story, but there are certainly times when they say some surprising things, and I pretty much let them run. There was one telling moment in one of the classes that I taught where a woman said, I write political thrillers, and she said that I get 50 pages in and I get bored with it. And she said, after taking your class, I realized that what I'm doing is that I'm imposing plot on the characters. And she said, I'm now at a point where it seems a better approach is to let the plot emerge from the characters.
Yeah. And are you hearing these voices while you're driving and stuff too, or?
Sometimes.
Yeah. He said that's the voice of my characters, right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah. That told me to do that. Okay. Yeah, that's crazy. And what are you getting out of writing yourself? What does this do for you? How do you come out of each book differently?
Ooh, I don't know if I've ever really thought about that.
Well, it's got to have an effect, I would think, especially when there's a lot of personal in it, and you got to have some growth. Do you know what I mean? Because you're living through your character in a way for the whole time it takes you to put the book together.
Right, and it does take me a long time. And there's writing. I'll put it this way: writing for me is its own reward. Just being able to come up with something that, when I look back on it, I'm proud of. That it really seems to have held together. A lot of the beta readers were fooled; they didn't figure out who the bad guy was. That's always a relief. So there's a certain degree of satisfaction. It's not a get rich quick experience, that's for sure. God, you know this. There are probably 20,000 books a day that are published. To bubble to the top is like getting hit by lightning, and so it's its own reward. And how am I changed? I guess I write more efficiently. I'm less prone to, make mistakes in terms of plot and pacing and things like that. But it's its own reward. I keep coming back to that.
Now, John, we interview a lot of people, and we ask them what they are, what their books are, and they say, I'm writing for entertainment. I want my readers to be entertained. And that's standard. But I go to expand on Al's excellent question, which is, do you consider yourself a storyteller?
Not really. I am, but if one of my kids, when they were little, would say, tell me a story. Oh man, I couldn't come up with anything that was, was any good.
So steal from the Grimm. It's just, they want to know. Yeah.
But what as a journalist, you cover controversial issues. And so trying to find meaning, I think, is sort of at the core of what I would do as a reporter. And I think that's what I'm doing as a writer as well. I'm tackling issues that are complicated, they're controversial, and I hope people come away with a better understanding of whatever it is the issue is. Sure, entertainment is part of it. You want them to be on the edge of their seats. You want them to be engaged with the characters. But I'm really tackling, bigger themes, suicide, drug addiction, abortion, white Christian nationalism, mental illness is a big factor in Enemies domestic. And so I'm really trying to get people to think deeply about important issues.
So it's not going to be a Broadway musical. Your books will not be turned into Broadway musicals.
or comedies.
Comedies. Right.
Well, we could do that. We could make that. Nice.
Well, hey, there's a question now, and John, do you have humor in your books? These are deep topics. These are dark. What's your use of dark humor or comedy.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think I've got a sense of humor. I mean, I did stand up when I was younger, and I love to laugh. And Lark's got, a sense of humor. There's a scene in Bullet in the Chamber where it's the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And, she hates these dress-up things. And so she's there, and it's the red carpet thing. And so, C-SPAN is saying, oh, and, who are you wearing? That's the fashion question. And Lark goes, Old Navy.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's a real knee slapper, I know, but
no, it is.
No, it can't be a total joke, and it's got to be more of a, laughing at yourself in a sense.
Self-deprecating. Oh, absolutely. Sure. There's plenty of room for humor, because you can't have it be dark, constantly. You've got to have, high tension, but you've also got to be able to take a breath. You got to be able to laugh. That's life. And that's what I try to capture.
And so when you're putting together this story, do you ever find yourself drawn to people you've actually met or seen or interviewed maybe or talked to throughout your career in politics and CNN and reporting and stuff? Do you ever find yourself using another person's personality in some way?
Well, I mean, Wolf Blitzer has made a couple of appearances, but, heck, I used to write for Wolf Blitzer, so I know, I put words in his mouth. So I've done that a few times, but nothing that really is, in essence, part of the plot. He's not a character in the books. He's on TV, which is what he is. There was one writer friend, he's a psychiatrist and writer, and I met him when we were both trying to get published 20 years ago, and he's now in private practice. And so actually Lark interviewed him as she was trying to get a handle on, what kind of a person could have done this thing. And so Paul Dobransky allowed Lark to interview him for the book, and so some of his answers appeared there. So yeah, I've done that, I guess.
Being a series, are you, or do you have a system that you've managed to keep track of the characters that carry throughout the series?
Not in any disciplined way. In fact, a couple of people have noticed that one character is portrayed one way in one book, and then her personality is almost has a personality ectomy in the next book. So I think there have been a couple of times where I've dropped the ball on that. I just hope people don't notice too much. And because look, the first book I mentioned came out 20 years ago. The actual amount of time in the series that passes is maybe 5 years. So you have to start suspending your disbelief about the characters and how they age, and what historical things were going on in their backstories.
And with the series, have you got this mapped out, like beginning, middle, and end, and where it's going to finalize, or is this just you're hitting them as they come?
It's just as it comes. I have an idea of what the next book is going to be dealing with, because I left that as a cliffhanger at the end, and but I've only started just thinking about it. I'm in procrastination mode right now, and but no, I have no idea where it's going.
Yeah. I always wonder that, because some people are so organized. So you're not really an outliner per se per book either.
Well, I am, but I'm not. I mean, Jeffrey Deaver he's anal about outlining. I mean, he doesn't even decide to do a book unless it fits together in an outline, and then he just meticulously goes through it. I like to have an idea of where it's going, but I generally discover as I'm writing the book that I hadn't thought it through as completely as I thought I had. And so very often I'm just writing seat of the pants in order to get from, one point to another that I hadn't thought about clearly enough.
How do you teach that in a seminar or a workshop?
Well, there's actually a class I teach on writing seat of the pants versus planning. And I think that the seat of the pants approach works for planning as well, because I think the goal is to be a plantser.
Yeah, planting, that's what I call it. Yep.
Yeah, to do both, because then you're less likely to have writer's block, because writer's block will freeze you up because you're afraid to make a mistake or you're just stuck. And, the goal is forward momentum.
Ooh, there you go, Joe. Now you know.
Yeah. Well, he's right. Of course he's right. He's John.
So you never come across any sort of a block or a problem with not feeling comfortable with, let's say, a direction a story is going in or the way a character goes. Do you ever have those sort of issues?
Well, those are two different things. Not being comfortable in a direction it's going, sure, I've had that. Being frozen and afraid to go forward, not so much. There was a time, this goes way back to when I was in radio, probably in the mid-'70s, and I was working at a radio station in Madison, Wisconsin, and had to bang out a newscast every hour. And I was the slowest frickin' writer, and I just couldn't put a sentence together. And so the station was in the middle of the boonies in a cornfield, and I remember going out it was at night, and I got down on my knees and I prayed, and I said, Lord, help me to write well and fast. And it was like even the prayer needed editing, because I wasn't telling God to make me, to answer right away. I just wanted to be able to write well and fast. And I went back inside and I banged out the newscast in record time, and I've never looked back. I've never had real serious writer's block since then.
Right. And what about doubt? Self-doubt?
Oh, well, doubt, that's life. There's plenty of room for doubt. But that's not the same as writer's block.
No, but it can intimidate you in the sense of when you're doubting and you're not 100% sure of something, or even less than that, 70% sure. Whenever there's a line, where's that line drawn to where you go ahead anyway to the doubt line?
I think you just said it. You go ahead anyway. And if the doubts are real, that'll be obvious, and you'll be able to fix it in the rewrite. I think people forget that the first draft isn't the last draft, and you're free to make all the mistakes you want in that first draft. I mean, there was a point where I was writing, I think it was Fake. For the longest time, I hit a wall. And I finally wrote in all capital letters, Russia does something provocative here. And then I moved on. I figured I'll figure out what Russia does. And as I was writing, I figured out, oh, that's what Russia can do. But I didn't go back and fill it in. I just kept writing under the assumption that Russia had done whatever Russia did. And then in the rewrite, I, shored things up. But again, I come back to forward momentum. Get that, keep moving forward, keep having fun with it. And if there's something that does cause you to have doubt, analyze it. Why am I doubtful? Maybe think onto the page. That's another way of doing it. You're doing forward momentum, but you're also thinking as you're typing. And maybe do that in all caps. So, this sucks. It doesn't make any sense. What can I ever do? And, write that onto the page, because you'll eventually gain traction, and then you'll go forward again.
Yeah, I do that. I do exactly that. And I call
Do
it,
you really?
I do exactly, big red, capital letters.
Yeah.
Move on. And a lot of times I write ugh to remind myself this stinks. Beside the ugh, that means even I hated it when I wrote it.
Right. And I've done that. I've done that too. And then I went back and in the rewrite I went, well, it wasn't so bad.
I call it getting out of my own way. Because I'm one of those people who likes to write the last draft first. And I do write a crappy draft, the red line draft. But I almost immediately start at that very same time, try to get that first draft done and make it like a last draft. And I just get my own way. I look over my wife and I'll say, I'm getting my own way.
Do you sometimes write your last chapter early in the process?
No, but I kind of know what it is. I almost think every book I've written, this will be 5, I've known how I thought. Sometimes it's changed. Like my ending moved up 2 chapters. I put another ending in. But I kind of know where I'm going. Exactly the same signpost. I don't know B through D, but I know, F through whatever. But the ending, I may not have written it, but I know kind of where I'm going.
It's the kind of thing that saves the day.
Right. Do you think we should, right? Try to actually write it before you?
Oh, I wouldn't say should, but I've heard that that's a good way to give yourself something to work toward. I know writers who do that. I don't believe I've ever done it. I don't think there's a should or an ought there, but I think that that's valid.
Actually, I take it back, because the book I'm writing now, because it's so new, because it's first-person female, I'm a third-person espionage, blow them up, shoot them up, be a spy guy. I think I actually did. I think I wrote the last chapter way before I was halfway through.
And I bet you it changes.
It did. Oh, it will. It will. But it'll change to fit the red herrings and the storylines I put together.
Right.
Get there.
Yeah.
But the setting kind of thing, and it's a good technique. So I'm glad you at least have some opinion on it, because you're a professional workshopper and a professional editor.
This is true. Yeah.
Well, there you go. Do you find that writing about these topics that you write about, in a way, countries, like when you mentioned Russia, it really has its own personality, doesn't it? As a country, like its own character in a sense.
Sure, it does. I mean, because countries are basically people. The leader, the people, the populace. It's true for every country, and so that countries can be characters as well. Yeah,
I always feel that way. Setting can be very important as well.
I find that I write more about settings where I don't live anymore. I'm not necessarily writing about them while I'm there.
It's interesting, eh?
Yeah, it is. It's sort of a memory thing.
Yeah, just in perspective of something. Well, listen, so are you big on social media? Do you have a website? Do you like fans and readers to interact with you? And if you do, where?
I do. I have a website, johndedakis.com, JOHN, D as in dog E, D as in dog A, KIS as in Sam.com. They can find out all about the classes I'm teaching, the books I've written. They can get in touch with me through there. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on X, but I don't really like it.
Yeah.
Stand in line.
Yeah, really. I'm on Instagram, but that's pretty much linked to my Facebook page. So Facebook is probably my main one. I think it's a pretty dynamic site, and you can reach a lot of people on social media.
Yeah, they're all good, Well, we're going to have all of that on our website. People will be able to find it easily, one click, and they've got John. So we appreciate you being here in the book.
Thank you.
Enemies Domestic, Lark Chadwick Mysteries, Book 6. So we're glad you came by, John DeDakis. Thank you.
I'm glad too. Thanks, Al and Joe. It's been great talking with you.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.